All right, welcome back to another edition Layups and Gimmies podcast on site here. Brakeman's Coffee, right in downtown Matthews. Special guest today, David Johnson. David, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a joy to sit in the corner of the coffee shop here and sip on some coffee and just chat.
Yeah, so we a lot to get into with David. An incredible story, a lot of different directions we could go. But as you all know, in listening, we love to have a platform for people to share their stories. The Layups and Gimmies podcast can't miss lessons for long-term success. So thinking about lessons along the way. And so a quick bio on David. David, avid tennis player, loving husband and father, 2 girls, wife Andrea, and 2 daughters. Lives right here in Matthews. Coaches tennis currently, but background in photography, even teaching and videography and silent images. We'll get into that and talking about the nonprofit and the incredible work that you guys do, and even the coffee shop we're sitting in. I want to hear a story about how this came about, and this has been a great place for me personally and so many people in this community to come and have great coffee, but good fellowship, sit down, and then enjoy good conversation, what we're going to do today. So why don't we just kind of start from the beginning and talk about your childhood and upbringing. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm a child of the 80s. During this, this time of like, this, where there was this like ancient phenomenon called boredom, right? where when you stood in line, you just looked around, where we played in the backyard, unsupervised, where we rode our bikes miles away, where we just played make-believe in the woods for hours on end, where pickup games in the front yard were common. I say all that because it was foundational for me in the sense of just a foundation of observant, curious, just kind of always wondering what else is out there, right? And so I think in those kind of micro moments of silence is where often for me, the Lord will speak and give me ideas, give me clarity. And so those were really important days and years of the 80s, of just like separated from technology and just kind of being curious about what else there could be, right? Whether it's in the woods or the backyard or a new friend or another trail I could find on my bike, another business plan I had some crazy businesses as a kid, like some really bad,
So
literally at 5 years old. I don't remember this so much, but now 5 years old, but my mom would tell me stories about me finding old rocks around the street, and I'd paint them, and I'd go to neighbors and try to sell, to sell them rocks, right?
So
Painted
good.
rocks. And then, the business development kind of grew, and I saw a business opportunity with my neighbor's yard who had all these beautiful flowers. And I thought, man, I see all these people driving home, all these dads driving home, wouldn't they love to buy some flowers for their wife on the way home? And so I decided to go to my neighbor's house and cut down the flowers and start a little flower business on the corner until my mom said, no, that's a bad business plan because I don't think the neighbors are going to be too excited about that. I say all this, man. It was, the 80s was a time that was, there was freedom and there was curiosity and there was growth and there was, it just built a foundation of me of wanting to do things differently, right? And even today, we have to fight to kind of create those moments of silence and remaining curious, so that saying things like silent images or Brakeman's are birthed out of like seeing opportunity and being observant and just taking the time to listen to the Lord, of just like, intentional silence, of just like, okay, what's next, right? Instead of just, moving on. So anyways, that's been my rhythm for my life. But I think it was, it's one of the beauties of boredom, right? That, sometimes it's kind of, I literally, my smartphone today is intentionally a dumb phone. Like, I can't do much on it. And that's intentional to kind of create those quiet spaces where it's like, where's the next idea? Because it might hit you when you're walking down the street and you're waiting in line and you're like, wonder why that is the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, in this age of technology, a lot of that's been taken from us. So we have the conveniences of all these, signals coming toward us, and all these, images, or whether it be news platforms, etc. And oftentimes we don't think, we don't use our brains, we
don't even
don't
have time to
drink,
think.
don't have
Right.
time.
Just staring at it.
right. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
right.
we're missing, like you got to think like, well, what would have happened if Martin Luther King had a smartphone or something,
Yeah.
or all the, some of the movers and shakers of the world, what if they had that constant distraction
Yeah.
and couldn't find that quietness for the Lord kind of to prick their spirit and kind of go, hey, this is what you're called to do,
Yeah.
right? So anyways, that was a long answer to kind of like what I grew up in.
Yeah.
But it's foundational for
right.
kind of the things that I've grown to love, and the consistent kind of patterns I've enjoyed to kind of just discover in myself and rediscover along the way. So, but grew up Charlotte area, grew up playing tennis, as you said. Athletics was I played whatever sport was in season, right? So basketball, football, baseball. But quickly, and it worked until 8th grade, and then I run into guys like you, and basketball wasn't so much, and so I decided, if I'm gonna have any success, I got to pick a sport where kind of scrawny, scrappy guys can thrive in. And I had a buddy who played tennis. I thought I'm gonna try this out, and man, it was just first time out, just loved it. It fit me, and so. I'm super competitive, and it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna be the best I can. Even I started late, 7th, 8th grade.
Wow.
I just like, I want to play in college. I want to take this to the next level, and I kind of just quit everything and did that, and
It's awesome.
and then ended up taking me into a career of coaching, teaching, taught at a private school here, Providence Day, for several years, and loved it. I mean, I spent 7 years in the classroom and and on the coaching side, and really felt like that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. But sometimes in those quiet moments, the Lord says, and also, in those opportunities, which for a teacher, the opportunities for discovery are the summer. And so I spent a lot of my summers overseas, kind of going. And some of it was coaching. I'd go coach teams and Australia and Paris and England, and I love to travel, but I also began to meet new nonprofits out there and opportunities to serve. And I was an English teacher, so I had a background in creative writing. And back in the day when people were still doing newsletters, they were saying, "Hey, can you help us write a newsletter? Can you do some photos for us?" And I thought, there's a void here for nonprofit storytelling. They don't have the capacity or the skill set to tell their story well. And so that kind of aha moment hit me in about 2005, where I thought, I wonder if, first I wondered if there was already a nonprofit doing that, of kind of doing visual communication, storytelling for nonprofits. So I began to do some research, and I couldn't find anyone who was necessarily doing that. And so I thought, well, this could be an idea worth chasing. And that led to, that led to me leaving teaching and coaching, not having silent images branded or the idea. I just had the calling to just go, right? Sometimes that's how the Lord works. So I'm just like, hey, the visual I give people a lot of times is like, the boat and the dock, right? And you kind of can keep one foot on the boat, one foot on the dock for a while. But eventually, it gets pretty uncomfortable, right? The boat starts drifting from the dock, and you're like, okay, I got to jump, right? Either I'm going to stay as a teacher, coach, or I'm going to try this thing, and I don't know where the winds are going to blow this boat, but Lord, I know you're in it, and so I'm going to jump in it, and let's see where it takes us. And so that led me on an initial project to Sudan, South Sudan, well, at that time just Sudan, to Darfur during the genocide. Which to start telling that story. So, but that's kind of the start of my story into Silent Images.
So you mentioned the Lord and just kind of listening, waiting, God speak to you. So was your faith always something that was important to you as a child, or was this something that kind of came about later in life? Talk about your journey and just of where you are now in your faith.
Yeah, it's always been foundational for me. I think my faith has developed from a young boy who feared God. I didn't want to make him upset. I kind of just, but I knew he was there. To a more mature kind of view of God as somebody who's a lot more relational, loving, gracious, wants to see me develop into the potential of his son and embrace me as always the prodigal son, right? The son who always just embraces the father. And I think the arms of the father was kind of the maturity of my faith, moving from not dismissing the reality of like he's also an amazingly awesome God who I am not like, and he's not my buddy. Like there is a fear and respect, hopefully a healthy fear of him. But yeah, so it's always been a piece of my journey. I never really had a major like rebellious time. I had some things happen along the way. I lost a dear friend when I was a freshman in high school, and awful experience for any young man to go through. But like this young man, my friend, literally died in my arms. I was 14 years old, and so I was in Boy Scouts. I don't know if you know much about Boy Scouts, but it was you're a patrol leader, so you're in charge of taking care of your platoon essentially. But this young man, his heart stopped while we were out playing capture the flag, right? And so I'm in charge of keeping him alive. And yeah, it was a so talk about a faith wrecking experience for a season. But it set me. It also it was awesome to see how the Lord came in. He actually brought a guy who was ended up becoming my tennis coach, my private tennis coach, but also was a young life leader, loved the Lord.
Wow.
And this guy began to just like shepherd me immediately. That was the summer after it happened. So like I was in this season of like, do I hate God? Am I fearful of him? And this guy came in and just kind of embraced me and reminded me, hey, no, the Lord loves you, but he also has an amazing calling for your life. And I think that year for me was incredibly important for deepening my faith, kind of renewing my faith. Like, okay, am I serious about this God who also has the power to allow a 13-year-old to die quickly? Yeah, I still love that God, but also, like, I ain't wasting a day. I'm not going to waste my life, right? And so, I was 13 years old, living and thinking like a 28-year-old at times, like, well, what's my purpose? Like, what am I doing today? Because I'm not wasting today.
And was it that experience that birthed that purposeful thought pattern in you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a great work ethic before. Like, I was pretty self-disciplined, but...
Did that work ethic and discipline stem from your dad, your mom? Where do you feel like that? Was it because you had nothing? Was it like...
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, I think, like I said, the 5-year-old in me was always, I was selling rocks. I was looking for, something to do, I wanted to leave my mark. I wanted to create. I wanted to, but I think both my parents had great work ethic, but I think there was also the faith element that came in after the loss of my friend that was like, okay, Lord, I can't take anything for granted. Right. And I think we're naive at 13. You think you're going to live forever, right? And so this perspective on eternity, like also what matters, begin to set in of just like, okay, how are you going to live your life and your day in this hour purposefully and not waste it? And so that really set me on a trajectory, which actually led me to coaching and teaching. So I thought, what do I want to do with my life that's going to be meaningful? And so it's like, oh man, I want to invest into young people. Like I want to coach. I want to teach, because here was my coach who really, a lot of ways, saved me from disaster. Who loved the Lord and kind of kept pointing my, lifting my chin and my eyes to the Lord when I was kind of sinking down. So, yeah. So I mean, those experiences, those childhood experiences, whether it's the boredom, whether it's heavy loss and trauma, sometimes those are the things the Lord kind of uses to get you in the right trajectory.
Do you feel like I've always been curious by personally, I've never had someone really that close to me, like experience that loss, or I've had, I'm a one-off, like my roommate in college lost his brother and kind of the same experience, like in his arms. And for that is such a, obviously real traumatic, life-changing event. But as you say, 13, you feel like you're going to live forever. I still kind of have that because I haven't had someone super close to me. And I'm just curious, do you feel like it is, like, how possible is it? How does someone shift to that frame of mindset without having to experience that type of traumatic or dramatic experience?
Well, we're kind of getting into the heart of silent images because it's entering other people's stories, right? I mean, the most intimate thing we can do with one another, I believe, or the most intimate thing we can share is our story. And so I think taking the time to listen to other people's stories, and for me that came through travel, and what I often say of finding ways to get on the dirt roads, right? We live in pretty beautiful, well manicured paved roads. And there's not a whole lot of friction, and but there's a lot of known, and people have kind of already paved the roads for us and eliminated the danger and the friction. But on the dirt roads and in the woods as a child, like that's where the discovery happens. And I think, being able to travel internationally, sit down with people who have lived through war, genocide, human trafficking, whatever, or talking to homeless people here, right? Just pausing and getting to know their name and listening to their story. To me, that's grounding, right? And that kind of takes you out of, the things I thought were really important aren't really that important today, And I'm 2 decisions away from being that homeless guy, who am I fooling? So
God, it's powerful.
So I think those are ways that we can, but that takes time, man. That's, that back to the technology thing of, you got 5 minutes or a few minutes, and the checkout lady that you see every day wherever, or your barista, you can sit there on your phone up until the last second, or you can intentionally kind of create a quiet space of connectivity and look them in the eyes and going, hey, how you doing today? Right? Like, and getting to know their name, getting to know the name of their kids, and each time you have a low touch of relationship, and all of a sudden you enter someone's story, right?
That's so powerful.
That's so powerful. I got chills.
I often have conversations with my kids, and this, it's kind of the things you're trying to teach your kids, and then you're trying to preach that same message to yourself of, it's so easy for us to get consumed in our own world, what's going on with us, our own problems, challenges, issues. But when you hear stories of other people who quite frankly, always have it worse in some respect, right? There's always somebody out there going through something harder than we are, and facing different challenges. It just broadens your perspective, right? It's, I think, even in the Bible, we see God of, asking us to not to look to things of the earth, but to look at things above, not to look at things that are temporary, but things that are eternal, and just changing that perspective. And oftentimes that comes through, like you said, just pausing, asking somebody how they're doing, and trying to kind of step in their shoes and understand what they're going through, and not making it about us. At the end of the day, I mean, it's not about us at all, and so that's powerful, man. Well, talk about, I mean, you mentioned silent images, and kind of how this was birthed, your time from teaching and then transitioning to going abroad, and just to share a little more about that, and explain more about what you guys are doing at Silent Images even to this day.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the invitation, because I think that's also an important concept that everybody's going to get at some point in your life. You're going to get that invitation, right? My invitation came sitting outside of a little hut in Kenya, blazing hot. Recently had met this guy who ran a charity called Persecution Project out of Virginia, and we had become buddies, and I was kind of doing some photography for another ministry in Kenya at the time. But the invitation came, and I still can remember like sitting there drinking a an orange Fanta, out of the bottle, which is how you do it in Africa. Orange Fanta is just like classic. And I'm sitting there drinking this, and he goes, "Hey, in a couple of days we're going into Darfur, Sudan. I need a photographer. You want to go?"
Invitation.
Invitation. Don't worry about your passport, because we're not going in legally. We're going to jump in the back of this old Russian cargo plane, and we're going to bring in a bunch of relief and some doctors. So just know what you're signing up for, that, once we're there, the U.S. government's not going to take care of you. I can't promise you I'll be able to take care of you, but if you want to go, the invitation's there. So I sat there, and honestly, I didn't have to think long, because, from several months ago, leaving teaching and kind of going, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how it's going to manifest itself, but I know I want to tell stories for ministries. So the Lord
Your 2 feet were in the boat at this point.
Oh well, I already left teaching. At least financially, I left teaching. I had nothing to kind of ground me. But here's another boat moment. It's like, okay, you really signing up for this? Well, Lord, I trust you with that move. You brought me here. Here I am in Kenya. Now you're asking me to take another leap, maybe into a little rougher, smaller boat, into waters I'm not so sure of. But man, it was the best decision I ever made, because it was there that once I landed and started to use the camera, and I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I want to do. I also saw the power of the camera, and was reminded by some of the Sudanese soldiers who, were sleeping in tents in this IDP camp, this internally displaced people camp. And these guys are out there with, big, guns protecting us. And, of course, I befriended many of these guys. But one of them, paused.
Smart.
Yeah, right. Real smart. Those are the guys you want to befriend. But, one of the guys told me at one point, he's like, I don't know if this is good news or bad news for you, but, hey, if the Janjaweed, which were the guys kind of coming in, the devil on horseback, the guys coming in and kind of creating the genocide, if they come in here and, attack this camp, you're going to be one of the first people they go after. And as we started to talk, what he was telling me essentially was, hey, the most dangerous weapon here is not my AK-47. It's you and your camera, right? It's the power of the photograph that the dictators and the oppressors in the world fear the most, because the power to educate and inspire people to take action, right? And it was sitting there talking to Tito that I was like, and this is what I want to do. Right? And just reminded, because I sat there, I'm watching these medical doctors and these people who, even him with his gun, I'm like, man, you're so much more of a man than I am, right? Like, you got a job here. I'm just like the photographer. But he reminded me, no, the body of Christ, we all have a role, right? And don't minimize it. It's not necessarily, what you have in your hands, it's how you choose to use what you have, right? So you could use this camera for a lot of harm, or you can use it to strike fear in the dictators and oppressors around the world and tell stories. So that's where
Were you married at the time?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh,
I was about to say.
Hey, listen, most of the stories.
I'm just making sure. Where was she thinking about this?
I didn't have a girlfriend who worried about me. It was and that's,
Okay.
So
Did your parents know where you were?
No, not at
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
No. So
What took you to Kenya in the first place?
Yeah.
Another photography project for another ministry had just said, hey, can you come here and work some time? But I was serving with them, and then that's when I met this other group that said, hey, we need some help too. You want to come in? And I was like, well, that really wasn't part of the assignment, but which is also awesome how the Lord works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think you're going in for one thing, but his plans are much bigger.
Yeah.
So really, it was in Sudan, the verse Proverbs 31:8, to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all the destitute, was laid in my heart. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. I came back. You take this long flight, land in New York, missed my connecting flight, so I'm sleeping on the floor of the airport in New York. But I'm watching the news, right? The constant, whatever 24-hour news cycle they had, whether it's CNN or Fox News, I don't know what it was, but this was about the same time that Britney Spears had just shaved her head. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Right? Isn't that sad though that we remember that? But I had just left this IDP camp and all these people fighting for their lives in the midst of a genocide. And I'm watching our American news talk about Britney Spears shaving her head. And I was furious. I was fuming. And I just thought, what a disconnect we have as to what's significant in the world and what we choose to talk about. And I literally started emailing and texting my friends who are photographers, you know, kind of just going, hey, what can we do? What can we do? I got no money. I don't have a brand. I just have an idea, but I think there's other photographers who'd be on board. And they started pinging me saying, let's do something. And that really was the birth of Silent Images.
So was photography always something you were passionate about?
It was a hobby. Okay. Yeah, but I was a writer to start with. I always had my camera ever since I was a little kid. Like, it was just something I enjoyed. Now, the medium has changed. The first 5 years of Silent Images, we mostly did photography. But now, 95% of what we do is video, right? Because it's, you know, it just shifted overnight. So I've learned video. But I've also hired, most of my hires are now professional filmmakers who are actually, you know, that's what they're, you know, amazing at. So I just, you know, I try to find ways to be the dumbest person in the room and make sure that I surround myself with super talented young creatives, and they're the ones who now drive Silent Images.
Yeah.
So from that moment in Sudan to the birth of Silent Images, to talk about, you know, some of the projects you guys are doing now, and you know, you mentioned
I mean, you know,
talent.
I mean, we're 18 years old now, so I mean, those 18 years, I ended up traveling to 50 different countries doing projects about topics, you name it, we've pretty much covered it, and so we do a lot of local stuff too, and so there's, you know, a lot of charities who need help storytelling, don't have, you know, complete budget. You know, whether it's child abuse, child neglect, whether it's education, whether it's, you know, something, you know, as simple but important as Habitat for Humanity, trying to build homes, eliminate homelessness, those, you know, Big Brother, Big Sister. Those are a lot of the, you know, projects that we, right now we're doing a film on affordable housing, particularly focusing on Charlotte, like what really is going on with affordable housing, you know, because you know, there's these topics get thrown out there and it gets really divisive and it gets political. And so our angle is always like, okay, where are the stories, right? You know, because there's, you know, there's stories of teachers who are struggling with affordable housing. And so, you know, why is this important for our communities and our neighborhoods? And we've done similar film series on mental health, just trying to humanize and tell stories, you know, where we went and interviewed some pretty successful businessmen who had never shared their story, but were like, had suicide attempts and are bipolar that you would never have guessed it. You've probably done business with them and thought, are you kidding me? And these, so anyways, to reveal their stories, first of all, they're the heroes. We're the people just drawing up the questions and shooting the camera. But those people who are willing to share their stories have been phenomenal. So anyways, we've done stuff on mental health and now affordable housing. We've done stuff on racial relations in the city. During the pandemic, we were trying to figure out how to get people just to connect. And so we did a film series called The Mile, where we had, you know, an African American guy and a white guy swap neighborhoods and walk each other's street for a mile, and then kind of come back and talk about it, which just created dialogue, right? Slow down. You know, silence, 3 miles per hour, right? There's something about walking also someone's street, and then, hey, man, tell me your story, because when I walk your street, this is how I feel. Yeah, when I walked your street, this is how I felt. Yeah. Tell me about it. So anyways, we love, you know, telling those stories too.
So much power in that silence.
So you guys have had the opportunity in Silent Images to tell some incredible stories. What's maybe a story that hasn't yet been told, or an interview that hasn't been done? If you could dream, is there in David Johnson's mind, a dream interview or dream story to be told?
Man, thematically, you know, and maybe it's because these two places, I've been to both these places, but I haven't had the chance to, for obvious reasons, to pull out the stories and get behind the curtain a little bit further. But I've been to Ukraine, right? And I was there before the war started, but began to meet. And this was about 5 years ago, so the war wasn't even active yet. But the fathers were already leaving the home because they knew something was brewing, and so a lot of these moms were left behind, and moms with kids, and I just felt like that's a story. I think if I could go back and now retell and dig a little bit deeper, because I know there are countless amount of mothers with children whose husband, we often get the story of, who's at war and the lost lives, which are all, obviously incredibly important to tell, but, that's kind of the flash media stories. Those are the headlines. Those are the 3-sentence ones. But what about that mother who's just, struggling in Ukraine just to kind of keep things going while her husband's gone? And so, I've been to Israel, but obviously the Gaza-Israel story, like there's stories beyond our headlines there, right? I've never been to Gaza, but met people there who were, lived at the border and kind of lived on both sides. And I just feel like there's always a healthier nuance to the story, other than our pretty divisive black and white, good and bad, evil, whatever we want to put on it. And so those would be stories, I think, if I had the time, and my wife now would let me go. Which is, you bring up another thing, Jonathan. It's my ability and my kind of agency around the world is now dictated, and it should be, by the reality that I have a wife and 2 beautiful girls at home, and now. But you know what? I take them with me now. One of my favorite projects is I've been going to Guatemala for the last 3 summers and taking my family with me. And so I go and I serve there, and I do videos of photography for ministries there. But then I'm able to take my family with me, and there's just enough friction there. I call it forced friction for my family, for my girls particularly. Like, it gets them out of this beautiful small town called Matthews.
Paved roads.
It gets them off the paved road and onto the dirt road. Intentionally.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So
what a gift to them.
If they're, our listeners hearing your stories, want to get involved, want to support Silent Images, what does that look like?
Yeah, we're 100% funded by, like any other charity, by donations. And so silentimages.org, you can go look at most of our videos are online. Some of them aren't, but that's how we're funded. Basically donors donate to us, and then we can, when that ministry calls us and says, hey, can you do this video, but we only have this much budget, our donors basically underwrite the projects being done.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
That's incredible. Well, man, so much to kind of lean on, so many lessons, but if you could maybe sum up one lesson from your time abroad, all your trips. It's hard to do. You said over 50 countries you visited, seen some incredible things, and experienced, things that many people will not get to experience in a lifetime. What's maybe one lesson that sticks out for you that you think would be valuable for others to hear?
One of my first projects I did after Sudan was in Uganda, in the slums of Uganda. And I'm gonna get to answering your question by usually the best lessons I learn are by those on the ground who teach me, right? The ones who we go to serve, who actually have a lot more to teach us, and we go in with thinking we have all the solutions. But I met this guy who had started a chess academy, a chess camp in the slums of Uganda. And start to kind of discover his story, being a former professional soccer player, Ugandan guy, blew out his knees, couldn't do anything, but decided that the one thing he could do was provide chess to these kids. And he didn't have money to start an academy or a school, but he had enough money and smarts to go, I can teach these kids how to play chess. And so he started teaching them, offering a bowl of soup, basically saying, Lord, this is what I have to offer. May not look like much. I got a chessboard and a bowl of soup. It resonated with me because it reminded me of my time in Sudan of like, Lord, I don't have much. I got this camera. Looks like everyone else is doing more important stuff, but he's out there faithfully doing this. Well, this little girl wanders in at about 9 years old whose mom her dad had died of AIDS. She's roaming the slums by herself, which usually leads to human trafficking. She's out of school. Long story short, she ends up being this chess phenom. She starts beating these boys, never played chess in her life. Became the youngest chess champion for all of Uganda.
What?
Qualified for all of the continent of Africa. At 13 years old, she goes and wins the chess championships for all of Africa. So this story blows my mind, but one of the, and I'll fast forward because some of the viewers or some of the listeners will go, wait a second, I've heard that story before. So I go home, I get a call from an ESPN writer who goes, hey, we've heard about this story. ESPN sent me over there to kind of consider writing a book about her.
Wow.
So you want to go? I said, sure, let's go. So he and I go back to Uganda. We do like a short, a little bit further short documentary about her. He writes a book about her called The Queen of Catway, which about 5 years ago, Disney did a film, The Queen of Catway.
Oh,
So, yeah.
That's incredible.
So,
Oh my God.
I say all that because the lesson learned, right, is to be faithful with the little things the Lord put in your hands. Right? Here's a guy, Robert, who's sitting in the slums going, he could feel sorry for himself and go, what do I have to offer? My knees are blown out. I can't play soccer anymore. But he goes, no, what do I have? I got a chessboard, right? I can offer a bowl of soup. And the lesson of like seeing the potential in the kids, because he looks at those kids and he sees different things than I would see. I see the poverty, right? And he goes, man, David, Americans come over here and they see the poverty and they try to, put shoes on them or give them candy, but like just because they're poor doesn't mean they're stupid. Right? There's potential here. And he saw that. And he's like, just because this kid isn't in school doesn't mean that there's not potential there. And so Fiona now, she's a world phenomenon in a lot of ways. I mean, I think she's gone to medical school. She's still, chess was kind of just something that she loved to do, but she decided she wanted to go to medical school. She's moved back to the slums to serve the people that, she grew up with. So anyways, The Queen of Catway, go watch that film. It's a fantastic film. That Disney did a good job. And it was one of the few Disney films that actually kept the Christian aspect in there because they hired Robert to be on set and to make sure that they did everything. And so Robert, who's a strong Christian, was like, so you'll see the elements of, faith, and it was a Christian ministry. So he's like, how are you going to take that out of the story? So I sat there and watched that with my wife in the theater when, we went to kind of the red carpet, like reveal of it. And I was like, I walked away going, I am so thankful that Robert was there because that remnant of faith is still in there. But anyways, that to me, but I could tell you story after that. Not every one of our stories becomes a Disney film, but that that transferable truth of somebody sitting somewhere in the world and kind of going, what can I do to be a part of the solution? Right? He didn't resolve poverty in Uganda. The slums are still there.
Yeah.
But like he did something beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? It's something eternal.
Yeah.
And those stories need to be celebrated. And those are happening all over the place.
Yeah.
And those are the stories that we want to continue to tell and put in front of people. Hopefully inspire people to go, all right, what can I do in my corner of the world? Right?
Golly.
That's
is like
unbelievable.
you probably as well realize like such an opportunity mindset for you with the perspective you have of like there could never be enough cameras to even tell everything that's going on.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing, which is like so powerful. Like
there's job security in this, that there's always more stories to tell, right? But also, like hopefully inspiring other filmmakers, photographers to look around your corner and see what stories you can celebrate,
right?
And be the antithesis of what we tend to get on mass media news, right? And just kind of balance it out a little bit.
But before we transition, because I definitely want to figure out when your wife came into the picture, how that changed a lot of things, I'm sure, from traveling whenever. But one of the last questions I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, kind of what you were just touching on with mass media and things of that nature, because you're in this space and what you see. Why do you feel like it seems like when you could take someone, a white guy, and let him walk a mile where this African American grew up and the African American do the same, and then they come together, that we it doesn't have to be so lopsided. Like, could you just touch on like your thoughts there, and like, why is it because it sells when it's lopsided? Is it because it appeases to people? Why can we not come to this place of, if we could just sit and listen to someone else's story to understand their perspective, we could get so much further as a country in what we're trying to create and do. But yet it seems like we're just so polar right now versus stepping into that person's 1 mile.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to taking the time to do it,
Yeah.
right? Because if we're relying on the quick, media sound bites to give us the narration of the story, then we don't slow down enough to listen to someone else's story, and we just take it and we just assume that's the narrative, and then we all buy into this lie of it's black or white, good or evil, and you're on one side or the other, and you sit down and you start talking to people and you're like, wait a second, we actually have a lot more in common than division, or and that goes politically, that goes racially, that goes through socioeconomic conversations, and so
God, that's powerful.
And you said something off camera that I think kind of ties into that. Oftentimes you go to interview these people to shoot these stories, and you think you're going to serve, and you yourself learn so much more. You're actually being served by them, maybe the underprivileged, or those whose voice is normally not heard. And I would venture to say, even the way media is covered nowadays, oftentimes, it's about the one doing the covering, the media.
Right.
They want their narrative to be put out there, instead of letting the voice, going in humbly, letting the one that they're covering, letting that story be heard, and kind of come what may out of that.
Yeah, and it's also split. It's also about speed and clicks, and and so what's going to sell, what's going to keep the ratings high. And how do we move it quickly? How can we condense this story? Because we got 14 other stories we got to try to tell, plus all the commercials, plus all, and so, like, you take really complex things and you try to condense it, and also just get, people to click, just the clickbait of it, instead of, if it's driven by profit instead of people, it gets really dangerous. And I mean, that goes with any business, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty transferable. That's a concept that us here at Brakeman's, it's, I would hope that you have a different experience walking in here than, with something with the Green Mermaid logo on it, right? It should be a different experience. I'd hope so.
Yeah.
Because it's driven by a different purpose.
Yeah.
So let's transition into that. You mentioned Brakeman's. We're sitting here in this awesome coffee shop. How did this come about? And it's obviously, from the outside looking in, been a huge success. It's a place that's always busy, and is an enjoyable experience for any who walk in.
Yeah.
Is this a home?
It was a home.
Okay, that's what
So I interviewed the guy who grew up in this home.
No way.
Yeah, he wandered in here one day, sat at the counter. He was about 80-something years old at that time. He said he just kind of chuckled at the barista and said, "This was my bedroom, And she said, "Tell me more."
What?
So I chased him down.
If these walls could speak.
Oh man, we're sitting.
If only you knew someone who could tell a story.
Yeah, we're sitting. This was the master bedroom, which also, this is a small space.
Yeah.
And so that was just the attic. There was nothing up there, but this was where his parents lived. And anyways, I sat down and got his story. And maybe we can link to that, because he's a character. But yeah, this is an old home built in early 1900s. But you asked how it started.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you some context. I'm not a coffee expert. I didn't have my first cup of coffee until after we had our first child, which is at 35 years old. So
Same for me.
Not the same for me. Third cup today.
yeah, so I am by no means a coffee expert, but I love community, and I love connecting people, and I see the coffee cup as the urban fire pit. It's what people gather around.
Yeah.
So it started with me and a couple buddies. At one point, there was a not so great coffee shop in the area, in this little town. And we used to always joke, if this thing ever goes out of business, like, we're going to start our own. We're going to do it right. And it was a joke, right? And we just kind of but both these other guys were pretty entrepreneurial too. And so one day, I'm walking past the old place, and I saw out of business sign. I snapped a photo of it. And this time, I guess I gave the invitation to my buddies and said, "What do you think?" Kind of as a joke.
Yeah.
But then,
But kind of serious. There was
it
the rock in you.
There was a little bit of a, hey, somebody might buy a painted rock in this town. How hard could this be? And so that started a slew of texts, and but also that observant kid that grew up in the '80s. Also, like, there were 1,000 other people that walked past his home. It was sitting empty. It had been like a nail salon, and it had been a bunch of different things, but it was just an empty old house in the middle of town. But me and my buddies saw something else, right? So the same place that everybody walked past, we were like, that place has potential. It could be a coffee shop. So that led us to meet the owner of the building, and him just, we were like, listen, we have no capital. We just have an idea. So this other guy runs a nonprofit. The third guy's an artist. We're all bro. So we got 2 nonprofit leaders and an artist. And we go to this business guy who owns this home and, tons of other businesses in town. And we go, we have an idea. No capital, but an idea. And he was awesome because he was like, you know what? I'm going to give you the first 6 months for free. You guys got no money? Just run with this idea and see if you can pull it off.
Wow.
Really gracious. And because he had been given other ideas about
What
this
about
space.
upfitting the space?
Well, so that's what we started to do. We had to go, okay, how much is it really going to cost to upfit? Now, the other guy, the other partner, he was a missionary in Africa for 10 years. He'd opened a coffee shop there.
Okay.
He had the street smarts. He knew kind of like, okay, what equipment do we need? How are we going to source our beans?
Yeah.
I was the community guy. I just was like, okay, how are we going to connect this to the community and kind of create a vibe and a atmosphere and a brand that people connect to? And so, that's really the short end of it. I mean, from there, it's just like, again, you take one little step forward, and the Lord just, begins to keep opening doors. And I think, one of the first things that people told us from the beginning, don't ever go into business with your friends. But here's why I think it's worked for us. Because it has worked. Now there's only two of us in it. Dave Baisden, who is one of the owners, moved out of town, and so we had to sell off his portion. So now there's 2 of us. But it's worked now. With the 3 of us are now 2 of us, because from day one, all of us said, "Hey, I mean, we have to make enough money, but like, it's not about the money. We want to build something cool, build something meaningful, build something, having people as your priority for the town. Let's gift an idea to the town, and whether or not it makes money, like, we can't lose money, but none of us are in this to get wealthy." And so the profit was secondary, the people and the purpose was primary. And so now today, we're like, we get invitations all the time of like, do you want to open up a second one? Do you want to franchise this? And we're like, no, like, we're not in this for the money. And nobody goes in the coffee business for money. The profit margins are so slow. They're so small.
Yeah, they are.
Like, you got to sell a lot of cups of coffee. So we also knew, we are not going to
got to step the merch game up.
Yeah, something, right? But so we all but that's why it's worked, because we're going, none of us see this as our primary income. None of us, are looking for this to build wealth. It's like, are we building something meaningful? Is it people? Are we serving the town? Is it still fun? And all of us are true, right? I mean, it's 98% of the time. Of course, there's always, when you're in this business, you get a couple of moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I see why people don't go into restaurant, retail, whatever. It can be tough, but there's tons of joy in just building something meaningful.
And an incredible name, Brakeman. Talk about that.
Well,
who gets the credit?
Yeah, we sat in that little room right there. We had 3 names that we were kind of kicking around. I'm gonna say Dave Baisden. I think because he was also our brander early on. He's an artist. But I don't really know who like had the idea of like Brakeman's, but I'm going to give it to him because I think it was his. But we had to vote on it because we had 2 others. But we loved it because it's kind of the antithesis of the Green Mermaid, because the commercialized coffee shops today are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. With the the messaging of like faster, faster, faster.
Speed,
get
speed,
in,
speed.
get out. You got to go, go, go. Which to me, man, if you want to speak to the soul of what people are actually craving, they don't come just for a cup of coffee. They come to connect.
Yeah.
Right? They come for a community, and that is transferable. That is not going to come and go. That's going to last a long time. And so the idea of the brakeman, who of course is the person at the end of the train who slows down the train, of like an intentional place to slow down. Of course, we got railroad tracks right next to us, so we liked the kind of train connectivity, but it's more about the brand and the space of intentionally slowing down. And so it was more of the messaging than just the name, but we were like, that's what we're about. We're about, creating activities, spaces, events here. We do a lot of like, daddy-daughter, tea parties with mothers and daughters and dolls, and none of those make any money. Like they, they are only for the purpose of like, let's create a space and a time for people to intentionally connect.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people keep coming back. I would never say we have the best cup of coffee in the city. Like there are places I go, I'm like, that's a great cup of coffee. Like, like they are do something real, and I would hope they would come in and go, yes, coffee's excellent. There's a quality, but they keep coming back because of the space, because of what they experience here, of the feeling of like, hey, I'm intentionally slowing down. Our password here is slow down, right? Everything about it is just like, hey, find a friend, hang out, and those are the things that keep businesses going for decades and and further. I mean, you think about what are those things that can withstand COVID and the depression and and so what are it's not just the cup of coffee, right? I mean, you look at businesses like Reese's or Legos that started in 1928, 1930, right? These are brands and businesses that started during the Depression, right? But had something that they were offering that was transferable, that wasn't relying on just a product, right? But they innovated enough. I mean, Reese's, but they had like a concept that kind of worked, right? Chocolate and peanut butter, this works. They innovate, they stay relative. Legos, like they kind of had a great idea. But, recently they've gotten into the movies, they've stayed relevant, but actually at the end of the day, they keep doing what it does best and keeps people coming back to it. And I think the coffee shop, I mean, I would not be surprised if even our large commercialized coffee shops have to start transitioning back to like, wait a second, it's not just about the coffee, right? How do we get back to like what the coffee cup really, the experience that it creates? So anyways, so we're 5 years old. My wife calls it my midlife crisis, which is a fair, a fair observation.
What were the other two names?
Oh, I don't know
if you're allowed to share that.
Come on,
You
man.
don't have to share it. I was
I don't think I've ever been asked that question. And I don't even know if I'm going to get them right. And Dave or Mark might correct me. So one of them was steam.
Playing on the train.
Playing on the train, little steam from coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That could work.
Little vanilla. The other one was the north. So we're on North Trade Street.
Yeah.
North something, because we're also the North State. There was something north.
Yeah.
It'll hit me.
I like Brakeman's.
Thanks.
Great choice.
It was almost unanimous.
But again, the lesson with Brakeman's, the same lesson that we got, from your childhood and silent images. I think that's so powerful is how many people walked by this on their smartphone probably and didn't take time to stop, slow down, and think what could be. The same question you asked when you're sitting there with the camera, what could be, is the same thing you asked to create a slow down space for people to come and connect around a table in someone's old master bedroom.
Right.
That's cool.
Same thing that Robert asked when he's sitting in the slums. What could be?
What could be?
And Fiona walks in and her life is
That's
changed.
it.
Right?
And
What a
I'm,
lesson.
I don't think any of us are by any means kind of a name it, claim it type of, hey, speak things into existence. But there is an element of truth that dreaming big is important,
Absolutely.
right? You've got to almost envision.
That's right.
As athletes, all of
Yeah.
us former athletes, how many times prior to that tennis match or the basketball game or the golf match that you're envisioning the way this is going to go,
That's
and
right.
standing there with a trophy or
Yeah.
visualizing your shots and
Yeah.
your opponent, and it's the same way in business and life.
Yeah.
You've got to have goals and dreams,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I'm hearing in this story as
Yeah.
well. You're a big dreamer and goal oriented, and it's paid off.
And it's
Also-
what Christ did,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
he was on a
Yeah.
mission, and he kept bringing people back to a place of let's slow down, let's remember our goal, let's keep our eye on the prize, and let's run the race.
And absorb failure.
Yes.
Right? We're you're getting a highlight reel right now, but
It's all been smooth sailing, right?
It was easy, right?
It's been a lot of
Yeah.
dumb decisions, things that failed, things you
Yeah.
thought you had a vision for, and then you're like, that didn't work out so well, But to be able to absorb those
Yes.
and still get back up, still dive for loose balls when you see them, you got to keep that going and kind of go, I'm still in the game, whatever, and I don't know where that is. That unique? Do you learn that? Is that part of being a child of the 80s where you're just like, you know what?
Yeah.
Not everyone gets a trophy, suck it up, and maybe next time you'll win something,
Yeah.
and you're just like, I can take some losses. It's okay.
That's so powerful. Well, speaking of dreaming big, good Lord willing, what does the next 10, 15, 20 years look like for David Johnson, for business, for life?
Man, I don't know, but I'm in my mid 40s now, and it is a season of like what's next. I don't know. I love what I'm doing. I love, I'm back in coaching, teaching a little bit. I wear essentially 4 different hats right now with teaching, coaching, Brakemans, and silent images. But the most important hat is, a father, husband. And I always tell people, I don't. Someone else came up with this quote, but your only success, your greatest measure of success is if the ones closest to you love and respect you the most. And so that's always primary. Like, how do I balance these things while still prioritizing my family and make sure that my daughters go, he's a good daddy, and Andrea goes, and he's a good husband. At the end of the day, that's success. It's not a coffee shop. It's not a ministry I run on the side. At the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to matter. So how do I keep that as a priority in this season of like what's next? I don't know, but I don't want to compromise that.
Yeah. I never knew, like, when we started this podcast, like, we were like, are we going to enjoy this? Are we going to hate this? Like, but man, and it goes back to silent images, right? When you just get to listen to someone's story,
Sure.
I'm always blown away, and it's powerful.
It's really the same mission,
That's it.
It's
Yeah,
not-
that's
it's just like
that's why I
people
love
tell their
podcasts,
stories.
right?
Yes.
It's long form. You can get into someone's story.
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
You
interesting
slow down.
You slow
You
down.
don't have the phone.
No, there's nothing, I appreciate you guys inviting me because it's fun to be on this side. I'm often on your side, and so it's
true.
fun to kind of have to think about, okay, how do I tell my own story?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been challenged, inspired, and seriously, just, it's a good
Encouraged.
reminder, encouraged. I need to evaluate my own life, and, I go back to saying earlier, talking about telling my kids certain things. I've got to preach the same message to myself that, oftentimes I make things matter that really don't matter, and there's this story out there, right, that needs to be told, people that we need to serve, and Lord, I don't really know. I'm roughly the same age as you, and I'm asking some of those same questions about, Lord willing, what's the next stage of my life look like? But I want to have impact. I want to have influence. I want to be used for greater purposes, not just to make money or to have certain worldly success. So anyway, I thank you, man. Thank
Me
you for
too.
your story and for giving us the opportunity to hear it and
I think
hopefully
one
to
of my
share it.
biggest takeaways is, like, what's my chessboard right now, and how can I use it? I think that was just such a powerful story
bowl of
because you
soup.
don't do it for what that ESPN reaching out, right? He didn't care about that.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't his point. He said, "Here's my chessboard.
Yeah.
Let me use it."
Yeah, the only thing we can control is the depth of our ministry, but the breadth is up to the Lord.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the depth of you, choosing to do some after school touring with a young man or whatever, that's the depth of like, I'm gonna serve this
Yeah.
kid. I don't know what's gonna, but the breadth
Yeah.
of like what is he gonna do with his life and the transferable, that's up to the Lord.
Yeah.
But just focus on the depth.
Yeah.
Right. Do it well.
John Quincy Adams has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Duty is ours, results are God's."
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
so good.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, be faithful to the opportunities you're given, and
That's it.
trust the Lord to do the rest. Well, one of the questions we like to kind of
Yep.
ask toward the end of our time is, if you could go back 20 years roughly to age 25, knowing what you know now, all these experiences you have, what's one can't miss lesson? And we say for long-term success, and as you said earlier, success is not just worldly success, it's not profits, money, but it's being a good husband, good father. But what's one lesson that you could share going back with yourself 20
Looking
years?
back at myself, well,
Yeah. What would you tell your 25-year-old self?
Well, Joby, you and I are pretty similar in the sense of like, we are, and you probably the same way, Jonathan. Like, I'm a get stuff done.
Yeah.
Like, like what is it going to take to win, right? Whatever that looks like, and there's some gifts in that, but also like I would tell my 25-year-old self, like, enjoy the journey, right? Just every once in a while, pause and look around, and be willing to just be present, and not just go after the next thing that the next wall you got to run through, but just slow down. Like I literally, the socks I put on in the morning are really goofy. Like this, I got this morning. Let's see, I got Mr. Rogers on, right? And it's a reminder to me when I put on my socks, hey, don't take the day so seriously. Right? Like, 'cause I deal with a lot of serious stuff, running sound images, etc. Like, there's a lot of weight of my 13-year-old self of like, live a purposeful life, put a dent in the world, as Steve Jobs said. But also, David, like, just have fun,
Play in the woods.
play in the woods. And when your daughter grabs you and says, "Hey, Daddy, you want to come play dolls?" Like, go play dolls with her. Stay in the woods and have fun. Enjoy the journey. Let the Lord take care of the rest. Stay focused, but just enjoy it and be playful, right? Don't lose that boy in the woods. I literally, on my desk, if you walk to my office right now, I went and took a photograph of the woods I grew up in as a young boy, and I keep it on my desk as a reminder to myself, to stay curious. Don't be afraid of the unknown, but also stay playful. Like, just don't lose that spirit of that little boy. And so it sits on my desk, and it's a great reminder.
Powerful.
Man,
Encouraging.
Yeah, that's, I think, a great place to end.
Yeah.
I mean, what an amazing testimony, and we thank you again for your time. This
What
is
a gift
fantastic.
this story's going to be to so many people. I mean, I know it was to me.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, the Layups and Gimmes podcast with Joby and Jonathan. Special guest David Johnson today here at Brakeman's Coffee and Matthews. If you haven't been out, you got to come check it out. A great coffee shop and a great place to build community. So we thank you for listening, tuning in. God bless.